Hello everyone! I can't believe that 2020 is over and that I'm filming this video. It is the 29th, I think, of December, but I am pretty much done with my reading for the year. I have successfully completed my challenge of reading 100 books, which was really exciting. I actually finished today. I finished my 100th book, and that book is on this list, so I firmly believe in waiting until you are completely done reading for the year until you film your favorites, because you never know when one of those books might be on your favorites list. These are just my favorite books of the year. I don't know how many there are, but I guess we will determine that as we go. Okay, so first up is an entire series of manga, and I have, I think, all the volumes that are out currently, and that is Daytime Shooting Star. And this is, I'm just going to hold up the first one, but there's 8 volumes out right now. I think there might be 9, but I have 8 of them. So, Daytime Shooting Star is a manga that follows a schoolgirl. I think she's in high school, and she ends up, like, having, like, a romantic interest with one of her teachers, and, like, it is problematic. I will say that. He kind of like takes advantage of her, but I still kind of love it. Like, this is definitely a guilty pleasure for me. Don't go into this thinking it's gonna be like the most amazing thing ever, but I just like really enjoy reading these volumes, and I think the art style is like really beautiful. And like, let me find one of the teacher, because I think he's just so cute. And he wears like glasses, and he's all like mysterious and stuff. Like, it's very stereotypical, but it's very cute at the same time. Well, this is the teacher, this guy. But, yeah, I just really like this series. So I just wanted to mention that because it is definitely one of my favorite things that I read this year. I think I started at the end of last year, and I read like half of these this year. So, yeah. Alright, moving on. The next book that is one of my favorites is Late to the Party by Kelly Quinlan. And this is a young adult contemporary story about a girl named Cody, I think. Yeah, I'm impressed that I remembered that. And she has 2 friends, Maurizia and Jacori. And Cody is gay, and then Maurizia is bi, and then Jacori is also gay. And they have this like cute little friendship. They kind of just do the same thing all the time, and they just like hang out. And it's wonderful and great. But Jacori and Maurizia decide that they want to like not waste their senior year, and so they decide to go to this party. And Cody's like, I'm not gonna go to the party, like I just don't feel like it. But then something happens, she ends up going to the party, and she ends up seeing one of the popular kids kissing a boy, and he's like, they're both in the closet, and they kind of form this like unlikely friendship, and she starts becoming friends with his friend group, and like meets a girl, and like the romance is really cute. I tapped this a lot. I really liked it. It kind of reminded me of like The Perks of Being a Wallflower, but it wasn't sad in that way. Like, it's about a girl it's like coming age story about a girl who like finds a new group of friends, and yeah, it was just really cute, and I really liked it, and I love the cover because yellow is like one of my favorite colors, and I really recommend this to anybody who's looking for some like queer fiction in their life. I'm really proud of myself because I really tried to prioritize reading queer books this year, just because like I came out this year, so I was like looking for it for myself, but also yeah, so it was just like there's a lot of those books on this list, which is really great. So anyway, moving on. The next book is actually my 100th book, the book that I finished today, and that is The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. This book was so wholesome and pure, and I loved it so much. The writing was great. I actually listened to it on audiobook and then decided to go buy a copy for myself because I loved it so much. The writing was beautiful, and basically this is about a guy named Linus Baker who works for Daiquiri, which is this company that like basically he's like a social worker, but in this like fictional world. And so he's like scheduled on this case to be objective, and he goes and visits the house in the Cerulean Sea, and it's an orphanage, and he ends up basically like, it just kind of like sweeps him away, and he ends up like really caring for all the people that live there. It's a lot of kids. And it's basically about like learning to not judge a book by its cover, and I don't know, like it was really cute. And there's also a male-male romance in this, and it was just such a pleasure to read. Like it was like a warm hug on a cold day. Like I just loved it so much. So I definitely recommend you pick it up if you haven't already. Right, the next book I have is very, very sad, but also very good. That is White Oleander by Janet Fitch. I have never heard anyone talk about this book before, but I was at Barnes & Noble one day, just looking around, and I happened upon it, and I just thought it sounded so interesting, and I read it, like, so quickly. I literally have, like, something underlined on, like, almost every page. The writing was just so beautiful, and it's definitely not for everyone, but I really liked it. It's a really sad story. It's about a girl whose mom is a famous poet, and she ends up going to jail for murdering her ex-boyfriend, because she was just like, she's a psychopath pretty much. And her mom is really abusive, like emotionally abusive, and uses her daughter's life to like write poetry, and like basically just like capitalizes off of her trauma, which is really fucked up. So then the daughter, I think Astrid is her name, so she ends up kind of jumping back and forth between a few different foster homes, each one with new challenges, and it was really sad. Like she just went through so much, and every house that she was at, you know, came with new challenges and new things, and the whole time she's like writing to her mom, and her mom was like pretty much gaslighting her the whole time. And it's definitely a story about like finding yourself and perseverance. It was really, really good. I tried to get my mom to read this, but she couldn't get through it. She thought it was too slow, which I agree. This book is very long. It's like 500 pages long. But I really, really enjoyed it, and if you love beautiful writing and like some somber stories, I definitely recommend that one. The next book that's one of my favorites is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I am so glad I finally read this book. This book has been on my TBR for years. It's been on my shelves for years, and I just like was always so intimidated by it, but for some reason, this was the year that I was reading all of the dark academia things. So I picked this up, and it was really enjoyable. I mean, like, the characters are all super unlikable, but that's part of the fun. And it's interesting because I feel like a lot of people read this and then read If We Were Villains, but I did the opposite. I read If We Were Villains like 2 or 3 years ago, and then I read this. I don't know which one I like better because it's been a while since I've read If We Were Villains, but I definitely like them both. I definitely understand why this has like such a cult following. It was great. I loved it. I feel like I don't even need to tell you what this is about. It's basically about like this group of friends who study Greek, and they're a part of this like secret club sort of. So like no one at the school studies Greek except for the people who do, and it's only like 5 or 6 people, and then you have to be like invited and all this stuff. And then like it's about a new student like getting into this group, and then he finds out that they're doing some shady shit, and it's kind of about like them dealing with the consequences of their actions. And it was really, really good. Definitely pick this up if you haven't already. I definitely want to read The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt because I did watch the movie, and it was so confusing and really terrible. It was probably the worst movie that I watched this year. I hated it so much. It took me like 4 hours to watch it, and it's like 3 hours long or something, and it was just so confusing, and I just didn't understand any of it. So I would definitely be interested to read the book now that I've read a Donna Tartt book. Moving on. My favorite graphic novel series of the year, which I only read the first 2 volumes, but that's Space Boy, and it's by Stephen McCraney. And it's about this girl who like lives on the moon, ? She lives in space or something. And she ends up like going to Earth with her family, and she has this like special power where everyone that she meets has like a scent. But then when she gets to Earth, she meets a boy who doesn't have a scent, and it goes from there. And it was just really great. I really love the art style, and I really love just like all of it. I'm trying to find a good, all the characters are sweet. Like, it was a very nice time. So like here's an example of the art style. And I just really liked this graphic novel series. I definitely want to continue in the series because I was enjoying it so much. The next book I have is The Henna Wars, which I wanted, when I picked this book up, I knew I was going to love it, but I didn't realize like how much I was going to love it. I literally read this book in like a day. I think I have a vlog where I read this book because I just read it so quickly. I was so captured in the story, and like it was just so great. So basically it's about these two girls who have met when they were like younger, but then they kind of like forget each other, and then they end up meeting again in high school, and they're in a business class together, and you have to like obviously create your own business, and so they both decide to do henna tattoos, which is really interesting. And then they kind of have like an enemies to lovers type of situation. There's female romance. It was wonderful, perfect, beautiful, immaculate. I loved it so much. It was very relatable. I like how the main character's family like dealt with her coming out and stuff. Like, I don't know, I just really enjoyed it. Also, this cover is beautiful, and it was just such a great time. It was super quick, such a quick read, and I loved it a lot. So, alright, the next book is in a similar vein. I read these around the same time, but this is another young adult contemporary book that follows a bunch of characters, but I actually ended up reading this for the Queer Lit Readathon. It was the group book back in like June, I think, and I would have never picked this book up if it wasn't for that readathon, and I'm so thankful because I think this is the book that stuck with me the most this year. It was just so good. It's called This Is What It Feels Like by Rebecca Barrow, and it follows three girls who used to be best friends, and they were in a band together, and then they kind of broke up for a plethora of reasons. They were all kind of going through things, and then, sorry if you hear that like motorcycle, I don't know what's happening. They broke up the band and stopped being friends. One of them is like an alcoholic. The other one went through a teenage pregnancy, and I think the other one is like gay or bi or something like that. Obviously they're all going through things, and so it follows each of them individually, but I thought it was really interesting because I've never really read a young adult novel from these perspectives. I mean, except for like the queer one, but like teen pregnancy, I've never read a book with that, a young adult book at least, and I've never read a book about a young adult alcoholic, so I just thought that was like a really interesting perspective. And like there's a music competition, and they end up like reconciling for the sake of the competition because they all need money, but then they kind of become friends again in the process. And I just thought this was like a really fun premise, and I really enjoyed it. Obviously, I don't know why I keep saying that, but the writing style was really great, and I can't wait to like revisit this in the future because it was definitely honestly one of the favorite books I read this year. I also wanted to mention The Voyage of the Frost Heart, which is a middle grade novel that I just read earlier this month, and I ended up loving it. I gave it 5 stars. Obviously it's on this list. I just don't own a copy of it. I borrowed it from the library. So here's a picture of it. But it's basically about this little boy who doesn't really have any family. I think his parents are like voyagers or something. They like left him, and so he's being raised in this village, but he's kind of like a problem because he's a song weaver, which is really frowned upon because I don't know, song weavers basically, they like sing songs to like connect with these monsters, and obviously these monsters are like tearing up the world, and people like really shun him for it, and then he ends up in the care of this guy who like tore across the Arctic. I don't remember anybody's names, but he like tears across the Arctic, and so he's like known to be this really strong and this really strong and like knowledgeable man, and they end up, well, he's a yeti. He's not even a man, but basically this boat comes through. It's called the Frost Heart, and they end up getting aboard the Frost Heart in to go find his parents. He like ends up running away, but then the Addie follows him, and it's just like a cute little adventure story, and I really enjoyed it. It was so much fun to read. The illustrations were beautiful. It was just such a good time. So I definitely recommend that if you're in the mood for a middle grade fantasy adventure story, especially in the winter. Like, I'm really glad I read it in the winter because it takes place in like the snow and the Arctic and stuff. So yeah. All right. This book I didn't originally have on my favorites of the year, but I have not stopped thinking about it since I read it, and that is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I'm sure this is on like literally everyone's list, and I knew I was gonna love this book. I remember when V.E. Schwab like talked about it like years ago, like I think right when Darker Shade of Magic came out. Like I remember her talking about this book, and I was like, oh my god, I can't wait to read it. And I ended up listening to the audiobook, and the audiobook was great, and I just like have not stopped thinking about this book since I read it earlier this month. And yeah, so I had to put it on this list because it was just so good. Obviously, I think we all know what this is about, but in case you don't, it's about a girl named Addie LaRue who makes a deal with the devil, and her like price is that she can live forever but nobody will remember her. And then she ends up meeting somebody who does remember her, and it goes from there. But I just thought the story was just executed so well, and I'm just really glad that I got to read it this year, and that V.E. Schwab was able to write it, because I know this is like her like soul story. So I had to put it on the list, even though it wasn't in the original plan. Alright, there's only 2 more left. So, first up is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. I feel like I did like a buddy read kind of with my stepsister and my mom with this book, because my stepsister read it and then I started reading it around the same time, and then like right after I gave it to my mom, and she was like obsessed with it. We all were obsessed with it. It was so good. I ended up listening to the audiobook when I read it the first time, but I definitely plan to go back and read it physically because the writing was just so beautiful, and the story is just like so close to my heart, and I just love it a lot. This is about a girl, Kaya, who like grows up in the marsh, and her family was really poor, and like long story short, they all like either leave or die, and so she's left alone at the age of like 12 or something. And she kind of just has to fend for herself, but she doesn't want to leave the marsh because she's kind of like outcast in the town. And it's about her like learning to take care of herself and just learn more about the marsh in general. And then it also coincides with the storyline of in like the present day, I think, which is like, so it follows her when she's younger and then also when she's older. But there's like one of the most beloved, I think he's like a football player or something, he ends up dead, and so it's like a murder mystery, and like everyone kind of blames it on her, and there's like a whole courtroom scene which really reminded me of To Kill a Mockingbird. And she ends up like being a scientist and like publishing all this work on the marsh, and it was just so great. I loved it so much. And this is another one that's really stuck with me throughout this year. I just like have not been able to stop thinking about it, and it was wonderful. I can't wait to reread it. And the last book, are you guys ready for my favorite book of the year? It's a very unpopular opinion, but I genuinely think this is the best book that I read this year. I'm nervous. That's Catherine House by Elizabeth Thomas. I know y'all hate this book, but I loved it. I'm obsessed with this book. I listened to the audiobook. The audiobook was wonderful. I'm gonna reread it really soon because I cannot stop thinking about it. I know this is a really unpopular opinion. Like, this is my favorite book of the year and one of my new favorite books of all time. Like, basically, this book is about a girl who goes to Catherine House. Her name is Inez, and basically Catherine House is like a boarding school, college type situation. And it's 3 years, but when you go there, you have no contact with the outside world, and she has like never really had like a stable home in her life, and so Catherine House is like the closest thing that she's ever known to home, and she kind of like loses herself a little while she's there, and then she ends up making like an unlikely friend with her roommate who's studying like this really specialized field that only like the most intense students at Catherine House study, and she was like really trying to get into this program, and then it ends up being her demise. And so Inez is like out to figure out what is going on in this department because it's really sketchy, and she ends up uncovering some secrets, and this is like a cult type of situation. But I just loved this. I loved the writing. I loved the narrator of the audiobook. That was really what sold it for me. And I love the premise. Like, a lot of people talk about being like really confused, but that's what I loved about this. I loved that I didn't know what was going on, and that was the best part of it. So yeah, that's my favorite book of the whole year. I love this book so much. It was great. So yeah, that is my favorite books of 2020. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what your favorite books of the year are, what you think of my favorites. I feel like a lot of these books I haven't heard a ton about, except for Addie LaRue on BookTube. So definitely let me know if you've heard of these or if you're interested in reading them because of this video. I would love to talk to y'all about books in the comments. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the new year. Bye!